On May 7th, 1969, Watertown, New York, marked the 100th anniversary of the chartering of their city. To mark this special event, that very special Centennial Day, Mayor Tom Roby from Watertown, South Dakota, the sister city, was the guest of that city and featured speaker at the Centennial Banquet that evening. Also invited and attending were 3 members of the Oscar Kemp family. Oscar Kemp of Watertown, New York, along with his adventuresome brother John, came west and founded Watertown, South Dakota. In spite of an extremely busy schedule, it was arranged to have an interview with the members of the Oscar Kemp family, Watertown's founding family. And now First Federal Savings and Loan invites you to hear this conversation with the Kemps.
In the old days, my grandfather, John Kemp, was a banker in Watertown, New York, and he was acquainted with Mr. Woolworth. And that was the time that he came in to make a offer to my grandfather for a $1,500 investment, 25% interest in the Woolworth stores. And for the $1,500, he would have been part owner. My grandfather then said, no, I would rather not put the money into it. I'll loan it to you on an unsecured note. But my grandfather loaned him the money, and of course, unfortunately, he wasn't a part owner in it. So you see the results of what it would have been. $1,500 would have amounted to. At this time, it would be probably several $1 million or $1 billion probably.
That's right. That's the voice of Jack Kemp. And that's probably one of the few mistakes the Kemps ever made, really, in the pioneer days of America. Jack Kemp and Paul Kemp and Mrs. Lauren Wood are with me, and we're broadcasting from Watertown, New York, in connection with their centennial. This is Spike Berry, KSDR News, and it's our pleasure to have this informal interview with these 3 Kemps who are here representing their family at the centennial event in New York. But we're more interested really in Watertown, South Dakota. As you know, John and Oscar Kemp came to Watertown, changed his name from Waterville to Watertown, and started the town, and that's the reason for Kemp Avenue. Now, we have 3 Kemps here in a row, and this is Jack Kemp, Paul Kemp, and Mrs. Lauren Wood. Now, Jack, you started the program, so we'll ask you the first question. When was the last time you came to Watertown, South Dakota?
I was there 4 years ago on a very short visit with my family as we were passing through, just practically overnight. We stayed at the hotel, what is that, Holiday Inn out there on the highway. And I had a long talk with Mr. Bramble. At that time, he was chairman of the board of some insurance company, and he briefed me on some of the pertinent things of the background of Watertown, South Dakota that my folks had told about.
Where do you live now, Jack?
I live on Balboa Island in California, which is about 45 miles south of Los Angeles.
Now, you mentioned the name Bramble. Of course, we have Bramble Park in Watertown. Anyone else that you would like to remember from Watertown, South Dakota?
I don't think there are any living people in Watertown that I can recall of that live there now. Of course, my mother often talked of the Gilchrists and Morrises, the old-timers in there, and those are the ones, having left there as a very small baby, I'm not very familiar with too many of the people there. Maybe some of my brother or sister here could tell you something about that.
How many Kemp children were there?
Well, there were 11 of us, and I would happen to be the youngest. And, of course, we left there shortly after my father passed away and went to California, and my mother chartered a private car and took us all to California, and so consequently we all wound up and stayed very close together all these years.
Probably should have had ladies first here, but the way we were seated here in the hotel room in Watertown, New York, it wasn't quite possible to start that way. We have Mrs. Lauren Wood. Mrs. Wood, where do you live?
I live in Los Angeles.
You were a Kemp girl, of course.
I'm a Kemp girl. My name was Imogene Kemp.
And your last visit to Watertown, South Dakota was when?
It was when we left there in 1906.
Tell us more about Mother, when Jack talked about a private car. What are you talking about when you have a private car?
Mother chartered a private car and put all of us in the private car
That's a private railroad car.
Private railroad car, and we took 9 days, I think it was, to get to Los Angeles. Her mother was out there and her brother. We went out to be close to them.
Now, what and who do you remember in Watertown, South Dakota, if you're going to rattle off some
the
names?
Nicholson girls, the Nicholson family, and the Stover family, and the Stokes family. And I think the Nicholson girls, 2 of them, still live in Watertown. Faye Nicholson, and I'm not sure her last name now, but she happened to be a PEO, and I received some literature from her in a cookbook. I wish I had a copy of it now. Mine has been misplaced.
Well, maybe you'll get one. You never know. You mentioned also in our conversations, as we've been here with Mayor Roby and the Centennial in New York, about Lake Kempeska. You folks had a cottage?
We had a cottage on Lake Kempeska where we spent the summers.
Do you remember what part of the lake that was?
I wouldn't have any idea.
Maybe Paul could tell us.
I was 5 years old.
Paul?
Is there a stony point in Lake Kempeska?
There certainly is.
I'm not sure whether that was where our home was, but I've heard of Stony Point. And we've enjoyed many, many seasons at Lake Kempeska.
Well, Mr. Williams will be glad to know that you remembered that, that's for sure. Well, now, when was the last time you were there, you say?
When we left there in 1906.
Well, that's an awful long time to be away from wonderful Watertown, South Dakota.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to 1907.
Was it 1907 or 1906?
1907.
Our father died the day of the San Francisco earthquake, April 18th, 1906. And I thought it was that following October we came out to California.
Well, now we have a Kemp discussion going here. How about that, Jack?
I was understood it was 1907. What do you think about it, Paul?
Paul, what was it now?
I'll say 1906.
You probably don't
Okay, it's 2 against 1 here.
Well, Jack was a baby.
Yes, Jack was just, you wouldn't know, Jack, you were just a young...
diapers, I was that small.
Well, Paul, you live where?
I live in Los Angeles and have 4 fine boys. One boy plays professional football, and one boy is vice president of a firm up near San Francisco, and one boy is vice president of Coca-Cola Company of Los Angeles, and one boy is a chaplain in the United States Navy.
Now, we have the 3 Kemp, Kemp children here. Well, we also have one grandson of the original Kemps in Watertown, unable to be with us for the broadcast because they just keep you Kemps too busy here. It's hard to get you cornered, get all 3 of you together because you're so popular. Jim is doing something this afternoon, isn't he?
He's going out to view the Thousand Islands, as I understand it. That's on account of him leaving tomorrow morning early.
His time is more limited than yours, so he has to see as many things as he possibly can. Well, now, you mentioned this son that plays for the Buffalo Bills?
Yes. He's been with the Buffalo Bills about 5 years. And he was out all last year with an injury, but now he's back in good shape and expects to play this year.
How about, there was a mention of another Kemp grandchild coming into Watertown. Is that one of your sons again? Who's the one that works for the president? That's the one yeah, well, that's Jack. Jack's the same one?
Yes. He's in Washington working for the Republican Party, and he travels around the country making speeches to all the colleges and promoting
Good Americanism.
Good Americanism.
And he works for the president in that capacity when he's not playing football.
Yes, off-season.
Mm-hmm. When was the last time you were in Watertown, South Dakota?
1906. I haven't been back since. But I'd certainly like to go back because Watertown, South Dakota is very close to our heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have good air service there, and I'm sure that we have a centennial coming up in about 9 years, and I know the mayor himself is already laying the groundwork for some of the Watertown, New York people to come out there, and I know that, of course, the Kemps will be an important part of that, and we want you to, but don't wait till then. We want you to come out as soon as you possibly can. Now, Mrs. Wood, you mentioned that you have some grandchildren very interested in this history of Watertown.
We have 7 grandchildren, and 2 of them are particularly interested in history, and they are especially interested in the fact that their grandfather founded Watertown, and they would like very much to go and see Watertown. I was sorry, if school had not been in session, I think we would have weakened and brought them here.
Well, John and Oscar, were they pretty young people when they came to Watertown, South Dakota to found the town and develop it?
Well, our father died was he about 45 when he died? And that was 1906, so you see it was 60, they were married in 79. So he was a very...
Well, now, as I understand it, Oscar was more of the outside field man, and he was more in Watertown, South Dakota, as were John, the other brother, was more or less here in Watertown, New York, and watched things from here. Huh?
Well, he lived in Sparta, Wisconsin. His home was in Sparta, Wisconsin, and he didn't live in Watertown. He just came out to begin with and then left. He had no family.
I'm still kind of curious as to see why these two young fellas were enterprising men of vision would stop in Watertown or Waterville, South Dakota. Was this because of the railroads? Who wants to answer that, Paul, or you, Mrs. Wood? I thought there was some kind of a railroad influence there. They liked railroading, didn't they?
I think according to my brother Willard, who wrote an article on Watertown, South Dakota, was that my father had government contracts transporting soldiers, I believe, according to his article, and that's how they landed in South Dakota. And his article tells about how father took a piece of lumber and wrote Kemp Avenue on it and put it up, and that's where Kemp Avenue is today.
Well, now, Jack, you're the most recent visitor to Watertown, South Dakota, and what was your impressions of Watertown, South Dakota? Do you think it was a pretty nice-looking town?
I thought I was quite impressed with it. The town seemed to impress me as not being asleep. It had lots of life, and I think that even for a small town, it was quite progressive. Although I guess it hasn't grown too much, it seemed to me like it was alert and very friendly. That seemed to be the feeling that we got from visiting our native town of Watertown, South Dakota. That was what I thought.
How about Watertown, New York? Now, you folks have been here and just certainly been entertained royally. What are your impressions of Watertown, New York in the short time you've been here?
Well, I think it's a very homey town. Everybody's friendly, and of course it's a small town, and I think I like that kind of atmosphere. I live in a small town myself, and I think that that's one of the things here.
Are you as amazed as I am about the... they seem to have quite a bit of pride in the fact that they have a namesake in South Dakota.
Seem to, don't they? They seem to have quite a pride in saying that they have a sister city, I guess you call it.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Mrs. Wood, is that your impression too?
I think it looks like a movie setting from California. They're picturesque homes and lovely streets, and everyone is so hospitable, and they certainly gave us a royal welcome.
The town square was...
The town square was most interesting.
And there's a lot of charming homes, large ones. Of course, we have the same type of home architecture and the massive home in many parts of Watertown, South Dakota. There's a similarity there, I think. Well, now, Paul, who's the one that likes the railroads so well?
Both
you and Jack like railroads real well.
Crazy.
Now, I think that must be an inherited thing, because like if Mother Kemp took all of the children and got a private railroad car to take them to California, she must like railroading too, so it must come from your dad, huh?
Well, I presume so. Jack and I took a trip recently on the California Zephyr to Chicago, and then we took a trip and returned by the Santa Fe Chief, Super Chief, and we enjoyed every minute of it. We really liked the railroads.
If there's some railroad president listening in, I assume there isn't, but what happened to the railroads in this country? You fellows have followed them, supported them along all the way, and are fascinated by them, like their service. Where did they miss the boat, or is a matter of expression?
Well, I feel they missed the boat by not modernizing their equipment and speeding up their trains. In Los Angeles, the Union Depot is almost a ghost city. Mm-hmm. Very few people take trains nowadays, and the railroads themselves, to me, don't seem interested in passenger service. They seem more interested in freight service.
How about that, Jack? Do you agree?
Well, I agree with that. I think that had there been railroad service in here to Watertown, New York, we would have. I'm sure I could have talked Paul very easily into coming to Watertown on the train. I may talk him into going home by the train. I don't know. We'll see how that works out.
Would you catch one from New York or Syracuse, probably?
Well, we'll wind up in Washington, but we would probably take one from there. But that remains to be. See how much influence I have with him. I've been disappointed that we weren't able to get rail service into Watertown, South Dakota. I'd like very much to come in there on a train sometime.
I think there's some Watertown people that share that same disappointment. But as we mentioned, it's apparently an era that's going to have to be revived pretty fast, or is going to have a very rapid death as far as passenger service in the Great Plains, at least the Midwest country. Well, our final question we want to toss around, because I know you folks are going to be met by a committee in just a few minutes, taking around Watertown, New York again, and you just go, go, go. But when was the last time that, by coincidence, someone just mentioned Watertown, South Dakota, and you perked up your ears, and it was somebody from our area, or that knew somebody from our area? It's kind of a small world.
I met somebody some time ago from Watertown, South Dakota, that lived there a very short time. I met them in California. But they were very much disappointed to think they had to leave Watertown. Of course, they were happy to live in California now. But that was quite a thrill to meet somebody from Watertown, South Dakota. And when we visited there 4 years ago, it was quite a thrill to walk in and see the main street named Kemp Avenue. And we had our picture taken by one of the signposts with my daughter, and so it was quite a thrill to see that they've paid tribute to our father by leaving the main street, Kemp Avenue.
Well, that certainly is the main street, all right. That was Jack Kemp. Mrs. Wood, we haven't talked too much about your husband. Is he a doctor in California?
Yes.
What type of practice does he have?
He has general practice, but he's more or less retired, and we're enjoying his retirement very much.
Well, now, we hope that you folks will be coming to Watertown soon, but when was the last time, by coincidence, you had a story similar to Jack's?
We were traveling in Washington, D.C., and a group was going through the White House, and the lady in front of me said something about South Dakota. We perked up our ears, and she said, "Were you ever there?" And we said yes, and she was from Watertown. And she had been from Watertown, but she was... they were in the service now, and they were traveling.
Well, that shows what a small world. What, Paul?
I haven't recently met anybody from Watertown, South Dakota, but every time I hear the name Watertown or South Dakota, my ears certainly perk up, and I'm very much interested in the town of Watertown.
I know I can speak for Mayor Tom Roby and his wife from Watertown, New York, and extending to all of you Kemps anytime an invitation to come to wonderful Watertown, South Dakota, where you'll find a typical Watertown welcome. We've been visiting with Jack Kemp and Paul Kemp and Mrs. Lauren Wood, all the children of Oscar Kemp, who was one of the founding fathers of Watertown, South Dakota.
A Conversation with the Kemps was produced by KSDR News and presented by the First Federal Savings and Loan Association of Watertown, South Dakota.